Welcome back to EHC Unfiltered. Today we are going somewhere most health and performance conversations don't normally anyway. And we're gonna do it as honestly and as openly as possible. I think it's a problem that more people don't talk about this sort of thing because the thing we're talking about today affects your dopamine system, your hormones, your relationships, your self-worth, your habits, your overall quality of life, and almost nobody is treating it that way. So, we are talking about sex, and not in a surface level tips and tricks kind of way, but we're going to get into the psychology, the physiology, the patterns people fall into, and the identity piece. So, we're going to talk about the dopamine mechanics, how substances and supplements affect performance, and the line between sex as connection versus sex as a coping mechanism. Allie is back again for her, I don't even know what number are we on now?
That's a great question. I think this has got to be 5, I think.
I was going to say 4 or 5 at this
Yeah,
point, but
something like that.
Allie, our favorite regular, is back, and this one is going to be probably the most personal conversation I think either of us has had on or off air with the other. So,
Yeah, definitely.
two coaches, different lived experiences, no filter. Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
I do want to start with the personal layer because I think if we go straight into the frameworks and research and things like that, we're going to lose people. So, I'll go first. I'll break the ice a little bit. My early exposure to sex was definitely shaped by a combination of things. Um, there's culture, religion to some extent. When I was younger, mainly, I was raised Catholic, and then the military, which has its own entire ecosystem around masculinity, sexual identity, all of it.
Right.
What I absorbed early on was a pretty transactional view of what sex was. It was very performance oriented, disconnected from the emotional component pretty much entirely. There really wasn't much of one there. And it took a while and a lot of experience to realize that the way I had been thinking about it was actually costing me quite a bit. And not just in my relationships with other people, but my relationship with myself and just how I showed up in life. The moment that it really clicked, though, was actually within the last couple of years, I think. This is still an
Mhm.
ongoing thing that I'm working on as well. I was definitely using sexual behavior as a way to regulate emotion. I was using it as an escape rather than a way to actually connect with somebody, especially, someone you're supposed to care about. That's kind of the idea behind it. And once I saw that, I couldn't really unsee it. And so that's kind of what this episode is going to be about, I think.
Yeah.
Allie, what shaped your relationships with sex early on? Culture, family, religion?
So a lot of it for me, I was also raised Catholic,
100%.
and not just Catholic, but I'm also the daughter of a deacon in the Catholic Church.
I
So
dated a pastor's daughter. Does that count?
I was a preacher's kid. So sex when I was growing up wasn't ever talked about, ever. It was a very taboo subject. I really didn't get a whole lot from it early on in my life. It was treated as that's something that married people do, and it's something strictly for procreation.
Mhm.
So it wasn't talked about. Like I said, it was a taboo subject, and it seemed almost like shameful to talk about, especially on the feminine side of things, which doesn't make any sense at all now that I'm older and grown up.
Women got screwed throughout history for forever. That's just the way it was. I don't
Yeah,
want to say that's the way it is because hopefully we're trying to fix it a little bit, but
right. So
you
it was
guys got
just
the short end of the stick quite a bit.
it just wasn't talked about. So when I was growing up, I had this really just kind of skewed viewpoint of sex. So it was just something that like I didn't really pay much attention to, even when I was dating in high school. It was something for me that I personally wasn't super interested in until I, dated the boy I really liked. And then I was like, I'm going to think about this a little bit more. And so for me, very early on, when I did become sexually active, it was shameful. So it was an act that I did, And then afterwards was like, well, I can't talk to anybody about this. So I'm just gonna sweep it under the rug, and it just never happened. And by the time I became an adult and started dating as an adult, it became something that after a after a 10-year relationship that I had, after I left that relationship, it became something that I used not as a weapon per se, but as something just to validate myself.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I stopped doing that and started just dating myself that I was like, okay, I was using this as something it shouldn't have been used for. So my idea of it skewed and changed from childhood through early adulthood, as I'm sure it has for most people.
But I would hope that most people change their minds about most things, between
Yeah, for sure,
adolescence and
for
being an
sure.
adult. Because, yeah, thinking back to even just being in high school and
Hmm.
the way because I remember even back then, a lot of what people did struck me as very odd. Just as
Yes.
far as like keeping like a list in your notes on your phone or whatever
Hmm.
of like people you've been with. And I know girls that keep lists and like rank the guys and like keep notes for like each interaction and things like that.
Uh-huh.
That boggled my mind. Even like the guys that would like just compare numbers of like how many people they've been with. And I'm like,
Yeah.
why? Like
Yeah.
it never clicked for me. And I guess I kind of missed out on that cultural aspect of it. I don't want to say
Hmm.
missed out like it was a bad thing, but
Right.
I get that. I guess that was just one thing that I was a little bit on the outside of the norm for it.
Well, and I
But
can agree with you on that. I was kind of in a similar situation, and where I was kind of on the outside looking in, and it wasn't until, and we'll get a little deep here. It wasn't until after I had been sexually assaulted as an older teen that I started looking at sex differently. And literally from probably that point on until maybe 3 years ago, it all seemed very transactional after that, and more of like, okay, I need to be in charge of the situation more than what sex should be used for.
no, and I don't think enough guys talk about it, so I'll share my anecdote there as well. Is it's funny, and I say funny, not like haha funny, but I didn't consider myself to have been sexually assaulted until years later,
Hmm.
years and years later, until I was an adult and I was able to be like, hey, so I was pretty fucking not cool, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was, how old was I? 14 maybe, I think. And I was like at my friend's house for a party. He knows this. Everyone involved is aware at this point. And basically I came to in the middle of the act with my friend's aunt, who was, like 40 something, and I was like 14. And I actually didn't tell my friend. I didn't tell him for a long time because I thought he was gonna kick my ass. I thought he was
Yeah.
gonna kill me. But yeah, it was messed up because like I came to and then was immediately just like I don't want to be here, and was
Yeah.
like, hey, I'm gonna go like smoke a cigarette,
Hmm.
and never came back.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But yeah, like my friend group, I told like my friend group about it eventually, and they were at the time, again, we're all in the same general age group, so anywhere from like 12 to 16.
Hmm.
And they were kind of on the same page as like, oh yeah, like he'll kick your ass. And I was like, yeah, da 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 da.
Yeah.
And we were in like a game chat on like Discord or something like that, like years later, and it came up. I don't remember exactly how, but it came up, and my buddy was like, "What do you got? What are you guys talking about?" And I was just like, "Yeah." So, and I gave him the whole story, kind of expecting him to be like mad at me or whatever. Like I still held on to that
Hmm.
viewpoint for some
Yeah.
reason. And it wasn't until he was like, "I'm so sorry that that happened to you," that I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, so that was bad, and not because of something I did." And that was coming from the friend that was known for like blowing up, being angry. He was half Mexican, half Irish, and could drink like it.
Yeah. Yeah. You could probably fight like it too.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, I've never had to fight them.
Like I never want to fight them.
um, but yeah, it's I think that's something that not a lot of guys are even aware of, probably.
Yeah, no, I don't think a lot of guys even talk about it and understand what sexual assault can be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that I think for a long time I blamed my first like real girlfriend in high school. Blamed her cheating on me for my sexual escapades afterwards.
Yep.
But I mean, I'm sure that played a part as far as me just being like, love isn't real.
Yeah.
Go into
We've
my
all been
sad
there.
boy hours.
Yep.
But yeah, now that I'm older and in therapy and looking back at all these things, and I've had a couple therapists be like, "Oh, you don't remember much of your childhood," and I'm like, I'm noticing a pattern here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There's a portion of my 20s that are just gone.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think though that moment of questioning it is actually where the growth starts because most people never get there.
Yeah.
Sex is one of those areas where the cultural script for it runs very deeply ingrained. So you just follow it until
Yeah.
something breaks. I mean, it's very normalized. The hookup culture now is so normalized, especially with drinking, to kind of tie it back to, the
Yeah.
last episode.
Yeah.
When inhibitions are out the window. I think we've all had a night or know someone that's had a night where they drank too much and woke up next to somebody they didn't want to fall asleep next to.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you just follow it until something breaks. And I just don't think that that's the way it should be. And
I agree.
I think it starts with us talking to the next generation, talking to the kids, having conversations like this and being open about it. Uh, Actually, my very first sexual encounter was when I was less than 10 years old.
Mm.
It's one of the only memories that I have from being that young. And it wasn't anything like the over the top, but it was, I remember like girls being in their yard. I was walking home from school. I was in like, what, third grade or younger, had to have been.
Yeah.
And they were drinking on the porch or something. They had to, like, thinking back, they had
Yeah.
to have been. But yeah, they were like flashing at me and my friends as we were like walking home. And it's like, that's fucking gross, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what? Especially being an adult now, it's like,
Y'all.
how are you not in jail? Why are you not in jail?
Uh,
But let's dive into the more sciency angles of it, the more science forward side of things with the psychology. Now that
yes.
we're kind of getting into, how it affects us. So let's build the framework, right? Because to understand why sexual behavior can become dysregulated and why it can turn into something compulsive or avoidant or, identity warping, really, because it can change how you think of yourself.
Oh yeah.
You have to understand the dopamine systems. And
Right.
sex is one of the most powerful dopamine drivers in the human brain, or for the human brain as far as experiences go. We're talking about activation levels comparable to hard drugs, right? We were talking about that before the episode started
Yeah.
in terms of reward circuitry. So every time you engage in a sexual behavior or consume pornography, your brain releases a spike of dopamine. What is it in the nucleus accumbens? Is that what it is? If I'm remembering.
Yeah.
You got your notes there.
Yeah. So go ahead.
But that was pretty much it. And that was just, that spikes and that's what creates the drive to repeat that behavior. So that's why you get that guilt of even if you don't necessarily want to, your brain is kind of pushing you in that direction.
Exactly. So to kind of bounce off of what you're saying, we had pulled up a couple of studies and did a little deep dive on some things because porn is it is an issue. that is affecting people in real time. And I don't know if people are actually aware of the effect that it has on the brain. And so when I've seen a lot of relationships break up, and I've been part of this population, where you're leaving not necessarily because things are like abusive or things are crazy, like there's a lot of underlying reasons, right? But usually porn is one of those underlying reasons. And because of how it changes the brain. And one of the studies that you had sent me, I did a little deep dive on, and it was talking about gray matter in the brain and how it affects that. And so I just want to touch on that real quick. And that if you don't know what gray matter is, it's basically the brain's processing tissue, and it's dense with neuron cell bodies, and it's heavily related to decision making, your impulse control, emotional regulation, and reward processing. And so the key things to take away from that, if we're going to get a little sciencey on it, is your prefrontal cortex, which we use for self-control and judgment, and then the striatum, specifically the caudate nucleus, which is linked to reward, motivation, and then habit formation. And so, like you just said, with these things like substance abuse, we're seeing the same kind of thing happen with porn. And so back with this study of Kuhn and Gallinet back in 2014, using MRI scans, they found that higher porn consumption was associated with lower gray matter volume in the striatum. And there's also reduced connectivity between the striatum and the prefrontal cortex. And that matters because it creates a stronger habit and reward loops and weaker top-down control, so your self-regulation. So
And that's why people start struggling with, masturbation and things like that. And it actually gets in the way of people's, relationships, like we were just talking about. But some people lose their jobs and stuff over this, like, because they can't get to work. And it's crazy.
it becomes more of the wanting to do it because it feels good to the wanting to do it because it's habitual. So it's this, again, the same thing you're seeing in substance abuse. It's the same wiring that's now we're seeing in porn consumption as well.
Yeah, because to put it in plain terms a little bit is just that the stimulus over time produces less of a response, which means that you need more. You need it more frequently. You need it more intensely. You need more novelty. So it needs to be new. It needs to be something you haven't experienced yet just to get back to your baseline. And that's this, like you said, that is the exact same neurological pattern that we see in substance abuse.
Yeah.
Another study was Volkow, I believe is how it's pronounced.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I'm going to pronounce it for the rest of this. So if it's wrong, someone can let me know. But the colleagues and him, I believe it's him,
mm-hmm.
did foundational work on dopamine dysregulation and addiction in 2011. Mm-hmm. And the mechanics are the same regardless of the substance or of the behavior. So repeated high stimulus input reshapes your reward center and your reward circuit. And so what's crucial to understand is that this is not a morality conversation. When we're talking about pornography and things like that. And, we are at a point now where we see drug addiction as, a disease. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of why, if you listen to, the things we're saying and really start understanding the way the brain works, is it gets to a point where it's really almost not your fault anymore. Like, yes, you made decisions that got you there. I'm never going to take responsibility off of somebody's shoulders that belongs to them. But if your brain's working differently, it's like, how much blame can you really put on somebody for that?
Well, and let's touch on that because bouncing off of Volkov's work and Gallinet and Kuhn's work, something that they both found together, and I want to make this very clear, and bouncing off what you said about this is not a morality check, okay, but this is just presenting the facts, and sometimes the facts can be a little uncomfortable, that their studies are correlational, not causal. So this isn't proving that porn causes gray matter reduction, but it is proving that people with certain brain patterns are and can be more susceptible to falling into that high consumption, leading into effects that likely depend on frequency and intensity, the age that they're exposed to porn at, because that makes a big difference. And then any underlying mental health issues that they may have, whether that's anxiety, depression, compulsivity, addictive behaviors, right? So, again, it could just be how you're wired as a human too, and that might be something you have to actually work on. But not understanding how your brain filters these things and functions with these things is also part of it too. So understanding how you're taking in information is a big part of it.
Absolutely. And I think just to add on to that and to add a little bit of context, this is a neuroscience conversation. Your brain does not categorize unhealthy versus healthy. So a dopamine hit's a dopamine hit. If you do something good, like good for you, you're going to get the same dopamine hit. So that's one of the things that a lot of people do is replacing, one habit with another one. So you replace the bad habit with the good one. It just
Exactly.
responds to the magnitude of the signal, right? So high stimulation repeatedly over time recalibrates your baseline. And then that recalibration affects everything downstream. So your motivation, your focus, your relationship satisfaction, because tying it back to needing more novelty and things like that, that's kind of where we see a lot of issues in relationships is generally men have the issue with porn in the relationship.
Mhm.
And what we see is that they stop pursuing their partner, or at least as much, or
Yeah.
they don't necessarily, you know for lack of a clinical term, get off the same way to their partner because
The
it's not.
emotional connection is very different than the physical
Yeah.
connection.
And it can actually start to remove the emotional side of things.
Right.
So even if you're already in a good spot, if you add in that factor, it can ruin it.
For sure. There's the lack of the emotional connection, but that stems over into like you can still have sex with someone and not feel connected.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I do think, again, back to the not shaming people thing. If you're doing what you want to do and you understand whatever, you just want to hook up, you just want to get your rocks off, cool. Who am I to tell you what to do with your life, right? But as long as you're doing it smart, that's
Right.
all we care about here. Is we're just analyzing what we're doing. We're bringing it out and putting it on the table. That's it.
Just want you to
Uh,
understand what you're doing to your brain.
yeah. And I mean, like I said at the beginning, this is an ongoing process for me as well. I'm not perfect by
Mm-hmm.
any means.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
Same. I'll claim that. I'm not. I'm just over
I-
here
we all
like,
we
yeah,
all
you're
we
right. You're
all
not
perfect.
even no.
But I do think the gender difference is something that matters. We'll get into that a little bit more, but the core mechanism is the same for everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you overclock the reward system enough, the ordinary life starts to just not feel right. It's not enough.
It's not fulfilling anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, what does a dysregulated sexual behavior actually look like in practice? Because sex addiction is obviously a term that gets thrown around fairly loosely.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to be a little specific with that. That's something I'm working on myself as well. Because I used to say things like, oh, I was a little manic or like something like that. And it's like, words have meaning, you
They do.
know? So manic is a very specific,
That is, it's a big word.
yeah, it's a very specific
Yeah,
term, very specific instance. And you
it
need to
is.
be careful when you're saying things like that around
Yes.
psychology professionals. But so we're not just talking about frequency, we can talk about function as well, right? So the question is, what is the behavior doing? Is it serving connection, intimacy, expression, or is it managing something else? Is it stress, loneliness, anxiety, boredom, low self esteem? It could be so many things. The
It could
patterns I
be.
see most often, I think, as far as using pornography or sex to cope
Mhm.
with stress rather than process it, and needing escalation or like some sort of novelty or stimulation to feel the same level of arousal.
So, and I can't speak for all women, but I will say with some women, and then in my personal experience, women can and do use sex to avoid actual intimacy. So I feel like there was a little bit of a culture shift at one point recently where more women were using men for sex than men were for women, which on my end, I had some conversations with some women when I became single a little while ago, and it was a very real thing for a lot of women because they're like, "Well, just go get what you need and then don't call him." And I'm like, "Well, isn't that kind of mean?" Like, I would feel terrible if somebody did that to me. And as far as like validation through hookups too, I think a lot of women do get that. I know for me personally, my view of sex changed as I got older before I actually dealt with my assault that happened. So I used sex as a way for me to be in charge of a situation and for me to be in control of it because I knew if I was in control of where things were going that I would be safe. I could say no and I could leave as soon as I wanted to. And for me, I got that validation because I was like, well, hey, this guy wants to be with me. He wants to be intimate with me and I'm in control of whether or not this happens. And I felt very validated in that because it gave me a sense of power. I don't think for all women that that's the same. My viewpoint of that has definitely changed quite a bit since going to therapy and actual like EMDR therapy for my assault because it happened two different times and it happened once when I was a teenager and then once as an adult. And I didn't realize it happened until it was a little bit after I left him and I was aware that something had occurred, but I didn't. I'm like, you're with your partner. Like to me, I'm like, is it really
Yeah.
assault? Really, can I classify it as that? And she's sitting there, my therapist is sitting there. She goes, 100% you can classify it as that. She goes, I don't care if you were a little bit with it when it happened, but you were aware enough to understand what was going on, but you weren't able to stop it because I had been drinking. And then I stopped drinking. And we talked about that last time.
I've
So
had,
go check
I've
out.
had, I've actually
But
had one or two situations like that.
yeah, so it wasn't until after I did EMDR therapy and really got down to the nitty gritty details of it and aspect of it that I was able to reprocess my brain in how I actually process sex and what does that actually mean for me personally in a functioning relationship? Like what should sex look like? And I think women handle unhealthy sex habits differently, but I think there's also like men are more visual creatures, I feel like, and that you guys need to not like you I'm not like saying like you got like you, Steven, but like you guys need more of that visual stimulation of watching it happen. And I think women actually we're more emotionally connected, which I think a lot of like romance novels come into play. And like not just romance novels, but obviously like smut.
Yeah, well, but even both of those glorify cheating as well, which is an
Yeah.
unhealthy
And
sexual behavior.
I think, well, and that's where I think like a lot of like living those weird fantasies come into play, and that's building that again that unhealthy habit, that unhealthy addiction of both men and women are being exposed to it. It's just different in
Yeah.
how we're being exposed to it and what we're actually allowing ourselves to be exposed to.
Well, I do think it presents itself differently, just in the sense that for men, compulsive sexual behavior tends to show up more in like pornography or impulsive hookups, things like that. And I do think for women, it's more of a validation
Yeah.
seeking piece.
Oh, for sure.
I think that part's more prominent usually, and then using
Mm-hmm.
just sexual attention. So not even necessarily sex,
Mm-hmm.
but sexual attention. So
Yes.
even just like dating apps and just the dopamine hit of matching with people and
Yeah.
stuff like that, of just this person thinks I'm attractive.
Mm-hmm.
It can be as simple as that.
Oh, the
Using it
first
as like
time
a
I got
plot.
on an app after I started dating, the hit and the high that I got from seeing what was happening, I was like, this is awesome. Everybody wants to
Yeah.
date me, and I'm like, I don't like this. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't like this place.
Well, and that's not to toot my own horn, but I've never had much of an issue like dating or being on like
Yeah,
dating apps.
yeah.
But so I've definitely seen both sides because for men on dating apps, a lot of them get like very frustrated because even if they either they get no matches or if they do get matches, then the person doesn't reply or whatever it is, and so
Mm-hmm.
that in and of itself kind of shows the different approach, right?
Right.
It seems like it's much more of like a like hunger almost for the men are trying to go
Yeah,
get it. And
yeah.
then the women are just kind of like, oh, this is nice. This is,
Oh, it was great. Like I sat there, I did nothing. I'm like, let me
yeah,
post
you
like
just
5
exist and
pictures.
look good.
Boom, done.
That's all you
I'm just
gotta
gonna sit
do.
back and watch the notifications pop up.
So
That
it's,
sounds very arrogant. I don't mean it to be.
no, but it's real. You know what I mean? It's one of
Yeah.
those things. We all like being told that we look good.
Yeah, of course.
Nobody
Yeah.
doesn't like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, whether or not you're good at taking a compliment is another conversation, but yeah,
Right.
it's different surface behavior, but it's the same underlying mechanic. The behavior
We're
is
both looking for that physical gratification.
and just regulating emotion. You know,
Yeah.
whatever it is, you're just feeling a little down today. Need someone hot to tell me I'm hot, and maybe I'll feel better.
Exactly. Yep, exactly.
um, you know, and the test for it is really simple, right? Because if you removed the behavior, if you
Mm-hmm.
couldn't access it for 30 days, what would you feel?
Yeah.
If the answer is anxiety and restlessness and any kind of emotional dysregulation,
Mm-hmm.
that's telling you something, right? And not that you're broken or fucked up or anything like that, but that behavior is doing something for you that probably needs to be addressed directly.
It's the same thing as substance abuse, as alcohol, as cigarettes, as weed, whatever your vice is. It's the same thing, and it's the same thing we talked about in our episode about alcohol. Is if you remove that, if you don't think you have a problem with it, okay, take it out of your life and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, because that
Take
was
it.
my big wake up call for the alcohol. Is I was like, alcohol is not. I don't have a problem with alcohol. Alcohol has a problem with me.
Yeah. And then somebody took it away from you, and then what happened?
Yeah, I fucking lost my shit.
Go watch the alcohol episode to find out more.
Yeah, but it is nuts. It is nuts just to see how much like the neuroplasticity of your brain
Mm-hmm.
rewiring and the turmoil that you can put your body through physically because of that is crazy. And so it's the same concept as far as when we remove it, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
like we were saying, whether it's a substance or an action or whatever it is, your brain doesn't know the difference. Dopamine is the dopamine. Um, but let's bring this into relationships because we've touched on it a few times, and this is where it gets practical for most people listening.
Mm-hmm.
In 2016, there was research showing that sexual satisfaction is one of the strongest predictors of overall relationship satisfaction. Not the only one, but it is definitely a significant one. And that means that if that piece is off, it is probably rippling into everything else.
Right.
But here's the thing, and this is something that I've seen and experienced. You can have more sex and still feel less connected, just like you were saying before, because there's a difference between sex as a performance, it being a performative act where you're, analyzing every little thing about it,
Mm-hmm.
and sex as, presence with your partner.
Right.
And when sex becomes goal oriented and outcome focused, you're disconnected from the other person's actual experience. It can really increase emotional distance, even if the physical frequency is up.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's I feel like for that kind of situation too, and that's a situation that I've been in before personally, it becomes a situation that brings more numbness than satisfaction, especially when it's done as a transactional experience. So if sex is strongly linked to relationship satisfaction. Like, I think we can all agree on that for sure.
Well, that's I've been in relationships before where we didn't have sex for a while, and then she was like, "You've just been so grumpy lately," and like all this stuff. I'm like, "Yeah, we live together and we sleep together, and I'm not getting laid." I'm kind of pissed.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like, even it does spill over into the rest of your life because you do wind up hyper focusing on it, and especially when you see sex as a performative thing, it starts becoming, well, then it's because of me, or it's because of this, or it's because of that,
Yeah.
and you kind of lose the plot. You kind of
Right.
lose the point,
Right.
and I think communication is definitely the piece that most couples never actually have when it comes to sex.
So I love where you're going with this. I'm going to take
I
it
was
and I'm
gonna
going to
say, I
rock
can
back
see
for
it.
it a
I
little
can
bit.
see it on your face.
So no, I love where you're heading with this, because it ties into kind of what we're gearing towards. But when there's that disconnect, and I've been on the receiving side of what you just said, where I'm living with somebody, I'm in a long-term relationship with them. We've been in a long-term relationship, and we're not having sex. And there's stress in the relationship now. There's frustration in the relationship now. And my ex was like, "Well, I'm frustrated because we're not having sex." And I'm like, "I can see that you're frustrated, but I also see that
That
porn
doesn't
is the issue."
make me want to do it.
And so it's one of those things where I know from like the female side of it, being in a relationship with somebody that did have an issue with porn, it became a problem in the relationship, especially in our sex life. And I think a lot of people can relate to this in that I didn't feel desired. I didn't feel like I was good enough or pretty enough or performed enough or was vocal
Whatever.
enough. Like,
Yeah.
it became little things like that. And it didn't feel fulfilling for me, and I didn't feel good enough to now be sexually intimate with him. And of course, that's frustrating for him because he just wants to get laid. But I'm not in the mood for that because I'm stressed about the habit that's been forming with him. And so when my stress is up, my libido's not there.
Well, and it's a vicious cycle on both ends, right?
It is. It is.
For the guy's perspective of it, like we feel like assholes, like when that's the situation, and
It's good to know.
we start, well, speaking for myself at least,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um because yeah, you start feeling like a dick because it's like, all right, it's been a few weeks or whatever, and it's like, at what point do you be like, hey, why, like, what's going on?
What's going on? Yeah.
But if you don't have that communication, because sex is still one of the most difficult things for people to talk about, especially directly, with what they want, with what they don't want, with what they need emotionally for the experience. So if you can't have that conversation of like, this is why I don't feel desired, or,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, then it just becomes fucking two people blaming each other for everyone being pissed.
Well, and I really think that's an important conversation to have when you start dating somebody. And I know when I started dating and getting back in the dating pool, that was literally one of the first things I brought up on like a second or third date. And I would be very upfront and I probably made a lot of these guys really uncomfortable because I was like, "So what do you look for in the sexual side of your relationship? What do you desire? What is a healthy sex life for you? What does that mean for you?" And when they would turn around and ask me the same question, I was like, "All right, well, I'm going to be straightforward with you. I will not date a guy that watches porn. I won't do it." And a lot of them, I did not get asked back on like a fourth or fifth date after that. And that was fine.
But you know
I,
what? Good. As far as
but
like, it's much better to put that line in the sand now. If
yeah,
that's something you have, if that's a boundary you have, set it now.
and exactly. And I'm like, I'm not going to be offended. I would prefer for this to end earlier rather than like, let's get, down the road a year and be like, "Ooh, by the way, I don't like that.
Right. Well, especially if it wasn't something that they were necessarily open about either. And then so you
Right.
didn't think it was a reason to bring it up, and then come
Hmm.
down, you find out, and it's just this whole thing that could have been solved by doing exactly what you did.
Exactly, exactly. And so I'll be very upfront with a guy if I'm on a date with him. And I hope that in my desire for people that are dating and getting back in the dating world is that we have those honest conversations, because it's healthy to have those conversations. Sex is a part of life, and it's something that can be absolutely beautiful if it's done with the right intention.
Yeah. If
And
you're not, if you're
physiologically
not,
it can be fun, but if you're not honest about it with yourself or with your partner, then it's just not going to be fun and beautiful.
yeah. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I like performing for my partner. I still like knowing that
Yeah.
I'm doing a good job.
Well, yeah. Yeah. I want to be told, like, hey, like, go game, coach. Like, I don't mind a high five. You know what I mean? But,
Exactly. But, it's different than just going through the motions.
mhm,
Over time, that does create that disconnect that we were talking about, that, neither person can really name, because you've both just avoided it.
yeah.
You just avoided an issue instead of confronting it head on.
Right.
And then so that's just another coping mechanism, realistically. And to tie it back to all the other things we've talked about, the reason that the guy in the first place probably has such a high sex drive or whatever is because that's the only coping mechanism he knows.
Hmm. Right.
Other than, alcohol or smoking weed.
Right.
Sex is the only other thing that everybody does.
Right. Exactly. We all have experience with it. Right. And I
And
think some of that plays into as well your hormone cycles as well. Right. So men, you have this 24-hour cycle, and women, we have like a 28-day cycle. So our desires are going to be a little bit different depending on what phase of our cycle that we're actually in. And that ties into how does that look for a relationship? And if you're having open communication with your partner, especially women, and what we need in every phase of our cycle, that's a game changer, because your girl can still be in her menstrual phase and can still desire you and can still want to be with you, and in some sort of other intimate way. It doesn't have to be sex, but she can be in like her grumpiest cycle and still desire that.
I've had relationships where that was when it was desired the most, which is fine by me.
If you're doing things right, that's how it can be, and that's how it should be. And
Look at that.
I, good job, bravo. I hope that more men would educate themselves on women's cycles to better understand their partner and what they need in that time in their cycle. Just because men have just that crazy, not crazy, but routine 24-hour cycle, and that we know your testosterone is going to peak at certain points of the day. So that's when you're going to want to be intimate more. Whereas women, our testosterone's not going to peak twice a day.
No, but you do still have, even though it is your overall hormonal cycle is 28 days
Right.
roughly,
Yeah.
but you do still have your 24-hour, you still have your circadian rhythm, you still have,
Right.
all
Right. Right.
those
Right.
things at play.
Yes.
And that was just to say that women are even more complicated. Like, it's not like we have a 24-hour and you have a 28-day. It's like, no, you
Right.
also have a 24-hour,
We have
but
many
you
things going
have the
on.
28 days on top of it, so it makes it even more
Yes.
complex.
Ladies, just a quick side note for the ladies. If y'all haven't read In the Flow or Women Code by Alyssa Vitti, Vitti, go look her up and look up her two books, because she breaks down the cycles amazing, in a great way for how to better understand your cycle and what happens hormonally and with the brain during that. So, ladies, if you haven't checked that out, go ahead and check out both of her books.
Repeat those for me one more time because I'm writing them down for myself.
So, when her first one is called Woman Code, and her second one is called In the Flow, FLO. And she actually has an app called Flow.
Oh, shit. Is that her app?
That's
The
her
Flow
app.
app is hers? That's cool.
The Flow app is Alyssa BT, and it's an awesome app. I always recommend this app for a lot of my women, and it really kind of does a deep dive on hormonal health, your symptoms, what's going on with your brain. It's really cool. It's really cool. So, ladies, check out anything by Alyssa BT. She's great.
Yes, and I'm gonna get shit for this probably, but I don't care. If you don't know what phase of your cycle you're in right now, figure that out.
Yes. It's not hard to figure out either. It's not hard. Like, ladies, we could do a whole episode on this if we needed to break it down, but it's really not difficult. You got four of them. Okay? You got four cycles or four parts of your cycle.
There's so much good data in there too. Like as a coach,
Yes.
I think it shocks people that like in my check-in forms because I have one check-in form for everybody. At the bottom, there's current phase of your cycle, and
Yes.
then I had to put in parentheses women
Yeah.
because I had a couple guys that were like, "What does this mean?" And I'm like, "It's not for you.
It's not for you. Just ignore that.
That's not the kind of cycle we're talking about."
Exactly. Exactly. But
But
it
it's
does come into play with sexual health and relationships.
yeah,
So, men, learn your women's cycle and understand where she is because boyfriend duties during that really are.
yeah. It's a cheat code, really. And if you
It
want
really
your
is.
woman to
It's
be happy, figure it out. Because if you start knowing, preemptively,
Mm-hmm.
she's gonna start whatever thing that you have an issue with. Well,
Yes.
fucking get ahead of it. Fix yourself. Anyway.
I mean, we could go all on that, but I will say just a quick, and I wrote this down just in case we touched on it, and I'm kind of glad we did. But when she's in her ovulation phase, guys, I
Mhm.
want you to know what this is. This is when she's feeling her best, she's looking her best, she feels like she looks her best, and she is thriving. Your lady wants to be seen. If you're gonna plan a spicy date, that's the time to do it. Just saying. And that's typically between days like 14 and I think 16, something like that, of their cycle. Not that everybody knows what that means, but we'll touch on that later. But
And
I'm just
some
saying,
are a little bit different. Some are a couple days on either side or whatever. But
exactly. So, just saying.
yeah, and so just to wrap up the sex and relationships part, if sex in your relationship is primarily functioning as stress relief or conflict avoidance, if it is the way you reconnect with your partner after a fight rather than actually resolving anything, been there. That is a pattern worth looking at as well. So, because you can't, I mean, you can use sex to avoid intimacy even while you are being physically intimate. Just like
That's
we
very
keep
true.
saying. I'm going to keep driving it home until they understand. But, all right. If you've been here and if you know me, then you know I'm all about the three P's, which are psychology, physiology, and performance. Those are my three things. All right. So, performance and psychology. This is where I want to get specific because I think there's a lot of confusion and a lot of shame around the physiological side of sexual function that can
Mhm.
be resolved with some basic education. And before we dive all the way in, I want to just say that basic education really is just that, basic. Like this should be taught in schools. I don't I remember the one day in like fifth grade that they separated the guys and the girls and made us watch the video on the TV they rolled in.
Yes,
I couldn't tell you one word that was in that presentation. Um,
I
and
could.
I didn't have the sex talk with, I could tell you what diagrams they put up.
Yes.
A visual learner.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the sex talk with my parents. I think the closest it got was I came home from school one day and my mom was watching like Dr. Phil or Oprah or just one of those things. And she turned and looked at me and was like, "You know everything, right?" And I was just like, yup, and walked away. I was like, I'm not having this conversation at this
Okay,
point.
wait, hold on. We have to touch on this just as a segue, a little side note. We're gonna all take a little
We're
sidetrack
taking a detour.
into Coach Allie's sex talk that she had with her parents. And
Yes.
listen, so I was 18 years old, and my parents, they came up to me and they're like, "Hey, we're gonna go out to dinner," and I'm like, "Cool, love that, everybody," and they're like, "No, just you." Oh, okay, cool. Weird, but all right. Like, my parents don't do that. We don't do
I'm
that. We don't
enjoying
spend
this
time
too much
together.
already.
And so we go to this diner that I know the diner because my high school boyfriend at the time worked at this diner. Okay, so we sit down in this booth, and my parents are sitting on one side of the booth and I'm sitting on the other side of the booth, and I'm like, huh, this is kind of weird. And then they start talking about my father's bad habits when he was young. And I'm like, bad habits? What are we getting at here? I have no idea what's going on. And they start talking about how he made poor decisions before he met my mother and they got married. And I'm like, trying to put the puzzle pieces together here. And I'm like, wait a second. Oh no, oh no, oh no. We're having the sex talk here. And guess who my waiter is? It is my boyfriend at the time. So my boyfriend comes over and he pours water for all of us at the table. My face is just, I'm beet red. I'm trying to sink as low as I can in the booth. And he's like, oh my gosh, like, I didn't know you guys were here. And I'm like, go away right now. I need you to leave. And my parents are sitting there trying to give me the sex talk, as in, not like what sex actually entails, but if I ever felt the desire or the temptation to have sex, that I could always talk to them about it. And I'm like, and I'm sitting there just kind of like, yeah, as my boyfriend at the time
Looking
is now
for
bringing us
the
appetizers.
exits.
And I'm trying to find a way out because at that point that ship had already sailed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so we don't need to eat. We can just head on out of here. We don't need to be here anymore. And it ended with we would really prefer if you just didn't have sex until you were married. And I'm like, okay, well, I think we should just go. I think
I
we've
would
all
really
said
prefer it if my bank account had $1 million, but it doesn't.
100%.
So
Nobody's perfect. Sorry. Anyway,
you know what? I'm pretty sure Jesus had some pretty positive things to say about prostitutes. So I'll leave it at that.
he did. He sat with him at dinner, just so everybody knows.
Yeah, he invited him. He said, "Come
He
to
did.
my table."
He said, come check this out. Just saying.
He did, however, chase bankers around with the bullwhip. However, that's a different conversation. But back
Anyway,
to
back to business. Thanks for joining us on that episode of Allie's Personal Life.
oh man, did you tell your boyfriend afterwards? We're deramming at this point.
Absolutely not.
You
No.
didn't even tell him that happened? Oh my god, you absolutely should have shared that with him. But okay, back to a little bit of performance and physiology, other
Let's talk
than
about it.
Allie being beat red in the face when she gets embarrassed.
It does happen quite a bit.
Testosterone. Everyone loves to talk about it. It is the primary driver of libido in both men and women. So yes, women too, just at lower levels. When testosterone is chronically suppressed, so again, including women, through overtraining, under eating,
That's a big thing. That's
girls,
a big thing. Y'all listening.
and chronic stress and poor sleep, your libido drops like significantly. And that's not just a psychological problem first, it's a hormonal problem. For women, especially, the estrogen and progesterone cycle adds another layer. So your libido naturally fluctuates across your menstrual cycle, like we were saying,
Mm-hmm.
peaking around ovulation, dropping in the luteal phase. That's just normal physiology. That is
Yeah.
just the way it goes. The central nervous system piece, though, is critical. Hamilton and Meston published research in 2013 demonstrating that psychological stress significantly reduced sexual arousal. And this is bi-directional. So, cortisol suppresses the hormonal and neurological symptoms involved in arousal. So, if someone is chronically stressed, high cortisol, dysregulated sleep, overextended central nervous system, their sexual function goes to reflect that. And
Yes,
it's not separate from the rest of your health. It is a pretty key indicator, actually. So, how have
exactly.
you seen, as far as the hormonal fluctuation piece?
Yes. I
Trying to
can
think of
speak
how I
on
want.
I can speak on personal experience with this. And I think a lot of women can relate to it too. But for myself, especially being in the fitness industry, there is a pressure to look and present yourself a certain way. And I know I take my training seriously. And back when I was younger and like a newer trainer, I did a lot of stupid training, and did get into a spot where I was overtraining myself and went and got my hormones tested. And this kind of links back to like, I think maybe the first episode we ever did with each other. Um, I got my hormones tested, and at 27 years old, I had put myself in perimenopause at 27. And listen, that's not easy to do. You really have to be stressing your body and your system greatly. So when I got my cortisol results back, they were like, you're literally off the charts. You're 27 years old. You've put yourself in perimenopause. You've stopped yourself from having a full cycle. So at that point, I wasn't going through ovulation. So I was completely bypassing that. So like the desire to be intimate
Gone.
didn't have it. It wasn't even a thing. It didn't even exist. So my libido was just trashed, and having that stress suppressed testosterone production, but it also disrupted the estrogen and the progesterone, and again reduced dopamine. So they were like, your body's not creating that. And I was
Yeah.
like, cool. So how do we fix this? And I'm one of the lucky people in the world that can't just do HRT, because I've got some nice little genes that don't like it. And I had to do everything in a very slow, methodical, very natural way without compromising my fitness and without compromising my lifestyle, which is very. And so I've firsthand been witness to what stress on your body can do for your libido, in that it's not good. And I do see that with a lot of my not a lot of my clients, but some of my clients as well, where like we have intimate discussions about what's happening in their life, and you have that as a trainer. You need to know what's happening so you can better train them. And if somebody is going through a very stressful event in their life, or autoimmune, and they're already prone to flare-ups and stress and hormonal dysregulation, the last thing I want to do is add more stress to that. So we modify what they're doing. But ultimately, if you again have that higher stress, the libido is going to be down, because you have those three interacting systems of hormones, how are they affecting the brain, and then how are they affecting your behavior. And
Right.
it works in this vicious cycle depending on how well you take care of it. So I had to take very much a more natural route, that was very slow, and it didn't happen overnight. I mean, this process took me, I think it was almost 5 years to actually get like a full cycle back naturally. At that point where I started weaning myself off of what I was doing supplement wise, where I was having a full cycle and ovulating and the libido was up. And a lot of that changes too when you change your environment. So I know for myself, when I got rid of the stressor, as in when I got rid of my ex, a lot of things changed for me. And a lot of it changed in a great way for me, where like when I got rid of that stressor, changed my environment, my libido went way up. And when I got my hormones tested, I was like, oh, this is what it's like to be a human again. This is awesome. This is fantastic. I love this for me. More people should do this. But if you're not also testing your hormones and you don't understand where you are currently, I always suggest people to do that to better understand what next steps you need to take, instead of just starting to incorporate any type of hormone therapy, TRT, whatever you have.
Absolutely. And especially for women. If you are getting
Especially,
on any sort of hormonal replacement, you should be getting your blood work done at first, at least as early as like every 6 weeks, realistically.
yeah, yeah,
Um And that's just because it's a lot harder to get women's testosterone levels, especially, but your hormones in general. For some reason, it's just harder for you guys to bounce back to baseline.
Yeah.
We see it all the time in like the bodybuilding community. Obviously, girls get pretty dang lean for shows, and some of them
Yeah.
lose cycles and things like that. But especially for the serious female bodybuilders who are, running gear,
Yeah.
if you're not keeping an eye on that, you're going to start running into some side effects that you don't necessarily want.
Yeah.
You know, enlarged clitoris, body hair, deep voice, the list goes on and on. And it's
Y'all, it's
not
not cute.
just,
It's not cute.
yeah, yeah. And it's not just a physical thing either. It's got to change the way you feel. So,
Yeah.
one thing I want people to hear is that if your libido is low or your performance is inconsistent, the first question should not be what's wrong with me emotionally, right? The first question should be what are my stress levels? And then what does my sleep look like? Am I eating enough to support my body and my hormones? And especially if you're in a deficit, bodybuilders, that's a very common thing, especially in peak week, but in prep in general, libidos are generally a little lower because you're burning so much fat. You don't have that, hormonal structure anymore. And like you said, you need to look at what your training load looks like. The fundamentals almost always explain the symptom before you go any deeper.
Right.
It's probably not some crazy psychological explanation. There might be some psychological factors for sure. That's the stress part of it. But
Right.
when our sleep's messed up, when all that shit's all out of whack, then it's just it's a excuse me.
It's
It's
you're
just a
digging yourself a
cascade. It's
hole. How
there.
big do you want the shovel to be?
That's perfect. I don't think I could have
Yeah.
said it any better.
Yeah.
One thing, so we talked about this a little bit before we started.
Hmm.
For you, when it comes to supplementing your hormones, you are not able to do hormone replacement therapy. So let's talk about what actually moves the needle from a supplement standpoint,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of garbage out there. And so
So much.
I want to be precise with this. So
Yeah.
if you're, as long as you're comfortable with it, what were you taking? What helped you? What exactly was it?
Yeah, so a lot of my stuff was actually something we're going to get into and something that we have in our notes. And it's funny because we have dubbed it the sex stack, but the thing is it works. So everything I was taking was made to help my body support my systems and now starting to create and support testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone, as well as balance my cortisol levels because it was crazy out of whack. So a lot of the stuff I was taking, I'm just going to jump right into it. Kind of get ahead of you a little bit here. Is blends of ashwagandha, maca root, and zinc. Which again, that's the sex stack. So if you're looking for natural ways to kind of help support, this is not going to fix magically your hormones. Like some people really do need that extra help of maybe like a pellet or something to that effect where you are doing TRT. I did use those three things as well as a progesterone supporting cream, wild yam cream. It sounds weird, but it's a thing. And that was a game changer. Having that stack with progesterone cream, they figured out for me that my estrogen, they did put me on a natural estrogen support, and I was on that for I think 2 weeks. And when I did that for 2 weeks, I gained 7 pounds in 2 weeks. I was crying at everything. And I was unwell. I was like, I don't like how I feel right now. And went and tested my hormones again, and my estrogen was off the charts. And so for some people that struggle with their estrogen levels, don't just jump into an estrogen supplement right away. Make sure you are keeping track of how you're feeling, what you're feeling, as well as your weight, because how your estrogen pathways detox as well is going to be affected, and that is either going to detox in a healthy way or in a non-healthy way, which can go more of a cancer route. So mine was still detoxing properly, but the side effects that I had from it were too fast and too soon. So I took myself off of the estrogen, but continued the testosterone and the progesterone, and the testosterone, the sex act, and the progesterone, and saw a huge improvement with that. But that and staying on top of my sleep and my food, because I was a chronic undereater for a very long time, that was a game changer. So the ashwagandha, the maca root, and zinc. Those are the three things that did stand out to me. And I'm glad you put those on those notes, because as soon as I saw that, I was like, I can talk about that all day. That's great. Let's talk about it.
That's one of my favorite things is when I have something, whatever it is, like a source or a note or like something, and then someone else like either double checks it or has something that like backs it up, and they're like, yes, and I'm like, see,
Yes.
like I know what I'm talking about, I swear.
Yes. Oh, I believe you.
But sometimes I still deal with like the imposter syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
and I think one of the things that's helped me with that is just a quote that I heard that was never remember anything you can look up.
Ooh.
And obviously it's applicable to certain situations, but
Yeah.
it freed up a lot of brain space, let me tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. That's so true,
Uh,
especially in your line of work.
yeah, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, it's like, yeah, I might not necessarily know it off the top of my head every time, but I can definitely find it out and I know how to
Yeah.
apply it, which I think is the important part.
Yeah.
But as far as the three that we talked about,
Yes.
ashwagandha, I think, has been super popular on the market over the last few years.
Yeah.
And this one does have solid evidence, right? In
Yes.
2015, it demonstrated significant increases in testosterone levels and improvements in sexual function in men using the supplementation. And the mechanism is primarily through cortisol reduction.
Right.
Lower cortisol, higher testosterone is
Right.
generally the way that works. Yeah,
I'm
300 to
looking at.
6.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say 300 to 600 milligrams of KSM 66. Ashwagandha is the studied dose range.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth noting for women too because cortisol reduction supports hormonal balances across the board.
One thing that you are looking at with ashwagandha is, and these are just like the things that benefit you while taking ashwagandha. It can, for men, improve erectile function, arousal, and satisfaction by indirectly kind of calming your nervous system as well. So we have those nice little added benefits of it.
Yeah, and on the opposite end of that spectrum, right, just to again tie it back to our last episode of alcohol and things, there are substances that will do the opposite effect. Everyone is probably familiar with the term whiskey dick. So alcohol can definitely take that away from you.
It sure can.
This one, some people might not know. Nicotine
Mm-hmm.
over extended periods can actually reduce the fullness and firmness that one might get.
Yep.
So watch out. Yeah, ashwagandha
These
is great.
vices, y'all. It's these vices.
The maca root, however, I
Mm-hmm.
think is one that's probably less popular. Just as far as how well known it is.
Right. I was going to say, I think it's less well known than anything else. But for those of us that do know what it does, it's in my supplement cabinet always.
I need to get me some. Uh, in 2002, maca root showed improvements in libido, and what's interesting, or that I found interesting, is that it doesn't appear to work by directly raising hormones.
Mhm.
The mechanism isn't fully understood, but the effect on libido is documented. You know, 1.5 to 3 grams is the typical studied range.
Yeah.
That's another thing. I will always add the studied range because that's one thing about supplements that people don't know a lot of times is that yes, this supplement, this substance can have this effect. However, so many times the actual amount that you're getting is a fraction of what they had studied. So
Exactly.
you're not
Yep.
going to get anything. That's why we tell
Right.
you that that stuff doesn't do anything, is
Yep.
because it's in the quality and quantity.
Quality is a big part of it too. Like this isn't just something you go get off your grocery store shelf necessarily. So you really want to look into the quality of supplement, where you're purchasing it from, how they're actually processing it, and just what the whole process for them looks like. What are the added ingredients, things like that. So, I mean, people, read your labels.
Yeah. And do your research because plenty of supplement companies have been in trouble more than once for, lying about the things on their, uh, ingredients lists or, straight up putting things that are illegal in their supplements. Generally, that's not like maca root and magnesium and stuff like that. But when
Right. Right.
we're talking about, um, like those testosterone stacks and things you might see,
Mm-hmm.
there have been companies that have been, I don't even know if they're, yeah, I think Blackstone Labs is still around, actually. I'll drop the name.
Yeah.
Because I was an affiliate for them for a while, and then um, what's his face went to jail for that. He was putting stuff in there that's not supposed to be in there.
Mm-hmm.
People got buff, but it was because he was fucking with people's hormones without telling them.
So there's that, and that's why we
Yeah.
read labels.
Yes.
And do your research. Do your research. But getting back to the macaroon, yes, it can increase sexual desire in both men and women, so ladies. And some evidence even found too that it does improve sperm quality as well. So for those that are trying to conceive, look at other aspects of supplementation as well and what it's not only doing for hormones and hormonal support, but what it's actually, the effect it's actually having on sperm and eggs too.
I've heard that for zinc as well, actually.
Yes. Yep.
Um, and there's another one that I can't think of, but yeah, because I think there's a similar stack for when people are trying to conceive for men.
There is. Yes.
So
Yeah.
I would have to look that one up. I don't have that one in front of me, but
So maca root is more for sperm quality. Like there is evidence shown that it can improve it, but a
and
lot of that has to be,
zinc is like the
again, it's more support.
quantity, I believe.
But zinc has been shown to improve sperm count and quality as well. So you do want to have those two kind of working hand in hand with each other.
That is interesting because zinc is one of the like foundational supplements for me, right? I take zinc
Right.
all the time. It's one of my dailies, but it's directly involved in testosterone synthesis. So having a zinc deficiency is associated with suppressed testosterone, obviously.
Right.
So if you're not getting adequate zinc in your diet through like red meat and oysters, pumpkin seeds is a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, supplementation is definitely something worth looking at.
And that's something that just backtracking into what we touched on earlier with the menstrual cycle and Alyssa Vitti, something she does cover in her books is eating for hormonal support and what foods will help support estrogen and progesterone production and testosterone support in females as well. So again, not sponsored, just a really big fan. So it really is worth going to look into that because a lot of her studies that she has in the book and a lot of her research has been awesome to use for a lot of my female clients.
I was gonna say I'm definitely gonna read those or see if there's audiobooks because I think that's probably one of my favorite coaching capabilities.
Yeah, well, especially as a male coach too.
That's what I mean. Well, one of my first clients was a female physician in perimenopause.
Yeah,
So I had to
yeah,
know what the fuck I was talking about.
exactly, exactly.
But I love her. She was great. She lost 25 pounds in the time we were
Yeah,
together. She credited me with saving her marriage. I don't think it was me, but it was the habits that we installed in our
right,
life together.
right.
And I forgot where I was going with that entirely. But
Okay, I like
she
the segue.
she was someone who questioned every single thing I said because it was, what does this guy know about being a 50 something year old woman in menopause?
Yeah,
Because on the surface, the answer would be nothing.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, and that's, I mean, I got that look a lot too from my older ladies when I first started training is like, okay, what does this little 20 something year old know about what I'm going through as far as menopause goes? And I was like, ooh, I put myself in perimenopause. I can tell you about things.
Yeah, see, that's actually awesome. It's
I
not
actually
not
know
that
a
you
lot.
did it, but yeah, that's a good
Not that I
connection to have.
planned on it, but I mean, I did it. But again, kind of going back to the sex stack is that
Mm.
none of those things are ever going to matter, and they're not going to override the big driver. None of these are going to be great if your life is still chaos, if your lifestyle is still chaos. So if you're not paying attention to your body fat, your fitness level, your visceral fat, hormonal health, and your mental state, and magic root powder is not going to fix your sex life. Let's
Yeah,
let's be real about it.
yeah. Well, and
It's just
I don't comment on people's posts very often, but there was someone that made a post and it was literally just symptom and then this is the, vitamin that you're deficient in. And
yeah,
I was like, that's not the way that works at all.
no,
Like even
no,
a little bit. I was like, there's
yeah.
so many hormonal things like stress factors, sleep, like can all cause those symptoms.
Well, and I don't think people realize how many problems could actually be solved in their lives, both from a health, like a physical health standpoint and a mental health standpoint, with literally just going outside and touching grass and getting some sun.
Yeah. Like even, sun's setting now for me
Yeah,
here, but I'm still going to go on my walk because I still need to get
yeah,
outside.
yes.
Otherwise, I'm just trapped in my apartment all day and it's maddening.
No, we are complicated house plants. We need to see the sun, y'all.
Yeah, we really are. But so for substances, just to kind of tie it all back together again, I know I mentioned alcohol, but in the short term, alcohol also lowers inhibition, right? And so we talked about the social aspect of sex in our society.
Mm-hmm.
That is the social mechanism people use it for. Physiologically, though, like we said, it suppresses testosterone,
Mm-hmm.
reduces your nitric oxide production, which is required for erectile function, gentlemen, and disrupts the hormonal and neurological symptoms involved in arousal and orgasm. So,
Yep.
short term reduction in inhibition, long term reduction in performance and satisfaction and feeling good about yourself, the whole nine yards. That's the real trade off, to be honest.
Yeah.
So it's the same pattern with other substances, though. The short term is, the perceived benefit that's masking a long term physiological cost. So when you're already working on your health and performance, that cost compounds quickly.
Yes.
And maybe it lands differently for women a little bit. I don't know. I won't speak on it, but I think we got some changing to do,
Yeah,
personally.
I mean, as somebody that had been down that road a little bit, it it's not helpful.
Well, and I'm gonna out myself here, and it's not gonna be good, but that's all right. When I was in the Marine Corps, there was one night where I came back to the barracks. It was like a weekday, and my friend just happened to be the one that was on duty. Shout out Corporal Kelly, and he was like, "Oh, where are you coming from?" And I was like, "Coming back from this girl's house," and
Mm,
he was just like, "How many girls are you talking to right now?" Because I mentioned something that I don't sleep in my own room more
uh-huh.
often than not, and I was like, I don't know. I don't know how many women I'm talking to right now. So I was like, let's find out. And we took out my phone, and between, the dating apps and social media and text messages, the whole nine, it was between like two and three dozen.
No,
I told you I was used.
a dog, just a dog over there.
But that's what it does. I was completely disconnected from it. My friend asked, he was like, "How do you keep up with like all those conversations and all that?" And I was like, "I don't." I was like, it's so shallow. Like most of the time, like I'll confuse conversations
Yep.
between people and it didn't even matter because we're not having real conversations.
No, it's all surface level for a reason.
Yeah, and that will leave you in a very, very empty feeling place. And it was not fun.
Uh-huh.
I will
Yeah.
tell you that. I was like, the only way I can describe it is I was spiritually drained.
Yeah.
I literally felt like I was just a body, and that was it.
That's I got to that point as well when I started dating, and I came a little too hot out of the gate, and kind of got myself in a similar situation. Now I won't say it was 2 or 3 dozen, because
It
damn, I
wasn't
can't keep up
30
with that. Are you
people.
kidding? But I mean, listen, I had the Rolodex, all right, so we were going through it, but it did get to a point with me where I got to a point where I was like, this isn't even like, it's not even fun anymore. Like, it's just,
Yeah, I
it
was
literally,
just
like, it
checking a
felt
box.
very, and I literally just kind of felt like a shell of a person. And for myself, just, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to be abstinent for a while. I'm just going to do that because it's not worth it at that point, especially when you know it's for the short term. I'm
You
like,
know
this isn't,
what's so funny too? And because now we're at the end of this, just about. So
y'all hang in.
anyone who's still here gets all the tea.
This is where it starts getting good in our episodes.
This is where we start forgetting that we're recording.
Yeah.
But no, it's funny that you mentioned that because the best I've ever been mentally and the most progress well, maybe not the best I've been mentally, but the most
Yeah.
progress I have made in, the short amount of time that it was because I was celibate. I swore off of women after a relationship that I was in,
Yeah.
and I started a business. I was going to school full time. I was doing my walks and reading my books and doing all the things. It was great.
Yep.
And then I met someone else and fucking ruined it.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, I was in the same exact thing. I was like, I'm just gonna stop. I'm just gonna stop dating. I'm gonna stop doing what I've been doing and breaking these habits. And I was sober at the time too. Like I was a year. I
I
think it
was
was
I
already
was
a year.
also sober. Yeah.
So I was also, I think, a year into being sober at that point, and I was like, I am clear headed. I know what I want for myself. Like I've got my routine. Like my work is taking off. Like this is good. So yeah, I've been there.
It's nice, but then you lay in bed at night and you're like, well, you're like I could,
I've been
but so since we're here, this is where I want to go a little bit deeper, just because I
okay.
think deeper than the science, I'll say, deeper than the
Yeah, yeah,
science,
yeah, yeah.
just because I think the physiology and the behavioral patterns are easier to talk about than this piece, and that's the identity piece.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's really what we have been talking about as far as when we're talking about our own personal journeys is the identity factor. For a lot of people, men especially, but not exclusively, sexual behavior is tied directly to how they define themselves. And that's where I was at when I was acting that way. Masculinity was measured in conquest, in sexual performance, and in frequency.
Yeah,
I was checking the boxes.
yeah.
And femininity generally gets measured in desirability, being
Mm-hmm.
desired by other people,
Yep.
and being chosen. So when that external validation is the source of your self-worth, you are in such a fragile position
Yes.
because your sense of yourself is contingent on something outside of your control.
Yes. Ooh,
And
that's good. That's good. That's a nugget right there.
I see the smiles on you. I see the gears are turning. So I gotta ask, what are you thinking? It looks like you got.
It's so that whole everything you just said is so incredibly true. I really do think for women we seek that validation in being desired and in being pursued and in being like chased almost a little bit. And I know I put a lot of my self-worth in how desirable I felt. And it really did create this completely fragile state of mind for me, whereas if I wasn't being pursued by a guy for physical intimacy, I didn't feel like I was worth anything. And that's a dangerous cycle to get into. And that spiraled into a whole other thing. But I know for myself, I sought that quite a bit when I started dating, and I wanted that validation, and I wanted that was what I was gauging my self-worth on. And so when I kind of came to terms with that and took a step back, and that was when I decided I was like, I'm just not going to date anymore. We're just going to give up sex for a little while here because it's now starting to get dangerous. And I was like, I fully recognized that I was heading down a really bad path and I was getting involved in some really not so great situations for myself. And I wrote dating off and men off completely, and I really took time to focus on like, what are we doing?
Who am I?
Yeah. Who am I without, because I had the conversation of who am I and what am I when I gave up drinking, and then the giving up drinking turned more into seeking validation through sex and being like, I can't use this as something to identify me. That's definitely not who I want to be. And I had to really take a step back and figure out what I was doing, and that I was abusing sex and using it just to validate myself and my feelings and my self-worth on how I felt like I was perceived to the male eye, and really take a step back and look at like what does a healthy sexual relationship look like, because I don't think I had ever actually had one, even with my partner that I was with long term. It definitely wasn't
So,
healthy, and like I can look back now and recognize that, and getting myself to a place where I'm like, this is what a healthy sexual relationship should look like. And it took a long time for me to get there. And I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I went to EMDR therapy. I did a lot of work to get to that point. That was not fun. It was not enjoyable. It was very real. It was very difficult. But when I got there, I could see myself controlling the situations too, in how to use it in a healthy way, but also
mm,
what does a healthy way look like?
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, that was something that I eventually had to confront myself as well, is that it was just another metric that I was using to avoid looking at something deeper, right? It
Right.
was just another thing to avoid whatever's going on.
Yeah.
Because if you're performing well enough in that area, then you can tell yourself that everything's fine.
Oh yeah. Like there was no emotional connection, but I knew I was doing a good job.
It's a very sophisticated avoidance strategy.
Yeah, I mean the physical validation was there, but the emotional validation was not there. And that's what led to more of that feeling of like you're an empty shell of a person more than anything else. Because physically, I could get it, but it left me very numb afterwards. It left me avoiding what was the actual issue that I was not wanting to deal with and putting in my little Bob the Builder box and shoving to the side. Um, and it made me have to confront those head on.
Yeah, and that's the hardest part, But it is funny, just to tie it back to what we were talking about a little bit. When I got into my most recent relationship, was the girl I met while I was celibate and sober.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
was,
Isn't that how it always happens?
yeah, and it's funny because it wasn't the longest relationship I've had. We weren't even together for a lot of it because we were doing the long distance thing for a bit.
Hmm.
And it was still the healthiest relationship I have ever had,
Yep.
period.
Yep.
Like, obviously, it didn't work out. We're not together, but still,
But you
just
can
like,
recognize that it was healthy, and now you know what you're looking for, though, and what that actually looks.
we even had a healthy breakup as far as between the two of us. Like,
Yeah.
everything was cool for the most part. I have never had a grown up breakup
Yeah.
where
Okay. Yeah.
where it wasn't like some big event or like because of
Yeah. Some
some
big blow
big
up. Somebody.
causality.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was literally just, she came to me and told me she didn't know what she wanted in her life, and she
Mhm.
didn't know if she wanted, me to be a part of it. And I was like, I'm so glad you told me now.
Yeah. Oh, for
You
sure.
know.
Yeah.
And so we had that conversation. I will say, after that, I did kind of revert to a little bit of my proclivities. Is that the right word? Yeah. Now I have to look up the word proclivities. Um,
Make a note.
but the self awareness question that I would push on this, right, is if you removed sexual performance and validation from the equation entirely,
Mhm.
which personally, when I think about sex in general, removing performance and validation entirely from the equation, my brain still goes, what's left?
Yeah.
But how solid is your sense of self, right?
Yeah.
Because that answer tells you a lot about how much of it is your identity and how much of your identity actually is constructed around external feedback.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm one of those people. I pride myself in saying I don't give a fuck what other people think. Like I'll make decisions and I don't care what other someone else has to say about it. I'll yell at other people.
Mhm.
I've been in relationships where it was like, well, what do you mean we can't, go here, do this, whatever. It's like, well, what about other people? What are they gonna think? And it's like, fuck other people. Why is that even a part of this conversation?
Right.
But it's funny that I can have that mindset in other areas of my life, and then when it comes to sex, immediately need like external validation. So it's funny the way that it's that.
It's funny how that happens, isn't it?
Yeah, well, what? I'm having a realization moment.
I can see it happen.
I'm
It's funny that you mentioned that because I actually have the opposite. Whereas I actually care very much what people think about me. And like I want to be liked, you know what I mean? I'm not going to be completely brokenhearted if somebody doesn't like me. That's fine. But I do desire to be liked. I want to be
Yeah, I
liked
mean,
more.
I think we all do.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to be liked the same way everyone
We
wants to
all
be
have
told they're
somewhat of
pretty.
that like that desire. And if you're saying you don't care, you're lying, okay?
Yeah, if
But
you say you
in
don't care at all, you're a liar.
that. But especially after going through all of the work I've put in surrounding sex and my viewpoint and my relationship with it in the intimate setting now, it's not like I'm not sitting there looking for like that crazy external validation because I know how I feel with it.
Right.
And obviously I can gauge how my partner is feeling, but there's more of the emotional connection now, and that's what I look for now more than anything else. So like, do I still appreciate like a high five, good job, coach? Like, yeah, but
Well,
I
and
don't
that's
really.
I think
What's
that's the
that?
thing too, is like anyone you talk to, anyone who's been around the block a couple times, will say it like the best sex ever is with someone that you actually like.
Yeah, and so true. If
And
you're
it's
not emotionally connected to that person, and that's where some of that brain chemistry comes into play. That's where things like your hormones come into play. It's where alcohol comes into play. It's where
we should have
birth
talked.
control.
You know what we should have mentioned that we haven't yet is post nut clarity. I don't know how that hasn't come up yet, but it's a perfect representation for what we're talking about.
Yes, it no, it is, but it is
And that's
though.
for men and women, by the way. It's for both of us. It's for
It
everybody.
is. Ladies, if you didn't know that, now you do.
But same framework we used the last episode when we were talking about alcohol, just because it applies here just as cleanly. Use versus escape, just like we're talking about. Sex as a use, connection, intimacy, uh, physical and emotional expression between people who care about each other. That's the idea. It deepens something
You're
when you're
looking for
using it.
emotional presence and safety within that situation, and there's a mutual respect and there's communication. And without that, you see the disconnection from yourself too and your partner, and it's not going to be as fulfilling as it could be. And that's again where you lose the satisfaction and the connection of it, and it's performing the act to perform the act.
Yeah, when you're using it as an escape, it's just avoidance, validation seeking. You're numbing yourself. Uh, some form of stress management. We all enjoy a little stress relief from time to time, but
It works.
it's using it's using a high stimulus behavior uh, in order to not feel something else.
Yeah.
And then so the same question applies from the alcohol episode to this one is which one is it for you? Not,
Mm-hmm.
in general, but right now in your life, in your current patterns, what function is sex actually serving? You know, and
So,
I
I
don't think
mean,
a lot of
that
us have
kind of
that.
comes into play of like, if you're single, try removing it completely and see what
Yeah.
that changes for you. Just like we talked about with alcohol. See what that actually does for you. And then the other challenge I would propose would be if you are someone that maybe doesn't necessarily struggle with porn, but it is habitual. And it is something that you seek towards and kind of move towards and gravitate towards, try removing that and seeing what that does. Especially if you're, and I'm not here standing on a moral soapbox, but if you're in a relationship with somebody and consuming porn, I would encourage you to try and stop or diminish the amount that you're pursuing or consuming and see how that changes your actual intimacy with your partner.
Yeah. I mean, that's going to make a huge difference. I'll tell you that
Yeah,
right now.
it will. It will.
Yeah. It's, because this is what I've observed, all right, in my many years. People who are using sex as an escape
Mm-hmm.
are often the most sexually active people
Mm-hmm.
because they're running away from something. And it's a lot easier to run away from something than it is to run towards something.
Yes.
And that might not make sense initially, but think about it for a second and it will.
Hit
But high,
pause, go back, rewind, watch this again.
yeah, right. But high frequency doesn't mean a healthy relationship. High frequency can actually be the signal that something's dysregulated, something's off. The behavior is doing work it was never designed to do,
Yes. Yes.
which is why we feel so overwhelmed with all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Is because we've all been that guy at work that standing there throwing his arms in the air like this isn't even my fucking job. Why am I doing this? I don't get paid for this. That's
Yep.
what our brains are doing right now when we do that.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
I stumbled into that metaphor. I'm glad I did.
I'm glad
But
you got there.
it took a second. But, I do want to be clear. This isn't how much sex is too much or too little, or it's just not about frequency. It's not about frequency at all. It is about the function and the awareness. Are you present? Are you connecting? Are you choosing this deliberately? Or are you reaching for it the same way you would reach for a drink or a cigarette after a hard day?
Yeah.
And I do think, like you said, even if you don't think you have a problem,
Yeah.
with pornography specifically, if you try to take a month off, start with a week. Try to take a
Yeah.
week off.
Yep.
Because, for a lot of people, it's a daily occurrence,
Yeah.
or at least close to. But try to take a week off and see how difficult it is because,
Mhm.
that was my awakening with the alcohol.
Yeah.
My guess would be it's going to be the same thing. You're going to find out, oh shit, it's harder to stop than I thought. Why does my brain want me to do it when I don't want to do it? And you kind of get this little disconnect in there. But
Yeah. Well, and it's just shaping how you can reshape how your brain responds to rewards and motivation. And ultimately, like you're just disciplined over time as well. And that's something that will carry into not just your person, but into your work, into your relationships, into your future relationships, your potential spouse, partner, whatever you make, whatever. But that will translate over time. So again, like I want to just reiterate that this whole conversation was not meant to be like let's get up here on our moral soapboxes and talk about all the bad things that are happening. It's more of just again understanding that your brain actually does go through your brain and your hormones actually go through changes in response to what you're taking in your environment. So if you desire change, and again, not everybody watching this may, and that's totally fine. But if you desire change, change your environment and change what you're actually allowing into that setting to see how it's actually affecting you. And is it actually affecting you? Some people might go a week without it and be fine. That's great. I love that for you. Fantastic. But some people really might struggle. And that might be a little bit more of a wake up call. Ooh, maybe I do need to address this a little bit.
I would be willing to bet. I'm not a betting man, but I would put money on it that if you are someone who watches porn regularly, and I'm talking daily at least,
Yeah.
if you start or stop for a week, I would be more interested in talking to the person that didn't have trouble with it, to be honest, because I think that's going to be the outlier. I think everyone is going to have some sort of stumble along the way, or just feeling the drive, feeling the urge, and kind of realizing, like, oh, this is actually a factor in my life.
Yeah.
But all right, Allie, last question for you. And
Yes.
you might have just answered it, so I may just be asking you to expand a little bit. But
Okay.
what is the one thing you want someone to take from this conversation, especially someone who has never really looked at this area of their life through this lens?
Ooh, okay. That's a great question. I would say what I really want people to get out of this is to have these uncomfortable conversations with yourself first, and then with your partner as well. Especially if you have a partner and you're in a relationship, talk about this because it is important. But ultimately address this with yourself first and foremost. Is what does sex mean to you? What does healthy sex look like for you? And then kind of taking a step back and looking at that from an outside view. Is this really healthy? And is this a good habit to have? And am I doing this with the right motivation in mind? And what am I getting out of it? But also, if you are with somebody, what is your partner also getting out of this, and what's their view on it as well? And it's to have these conversations. So if you get anything out of today, more than anything, I would challenge you to have the really uncomfortable conversations about sex with yourself and with your partner.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to put it. The only thing I'll add is sex is not just sex. And this is something that, again, I am still working on myself, okay? Sex is not just sex. It is tied to your dopamine system, your hormonal health, your relationship satisfaction, your identity as a person, and how you're coping with life, which means it's worth the same level of self-awareness as you would bring to your training or your nutrition or your mental health. And just like Ali was saying, not shame, not anxiety, just honest examination. And ask yourself, is this connecting me or protecting me from something? Is it an expression or an escape? If you don't love the answer, that's not a judgment, but it's a starting point. It might be time for an adjustment.
Yep.
So, if this episode made you think about your patterns, your relationships, your own self awareness in this space, that's the win. That's what we're here for. Share it with someone who needs it. This conversation is not an easy one to have for anybody.
Not even a little bit. Not even a little bit. It can be really uncomfortable too, but
And these are the ones that, should happen. They should happen. They're just unfortunately the ones that usually don't. So follow me on Instagram at EHC_Steven. That is where everything lives, the school community, the podcast, all of it. All of my links are there. Allie, this is 4, 5, 6 episodes, however many it is. And there's going to be more. We're just going to keep it going. So we will catch you on the next one. Allie, do you have any final words before we sign off?
I hope this episode made you a little uncomfortable, and if it did, congratulations. You might need to have some conversations with yourself.
There you go. That's the first step. All right. This was EHC Unfiltered. We will see you guys next time.